Hey there viewers, welcome back to the South Main Auto Channel. Got this 2008 Honda Pilot in today for the 100K service, which includes a whole bunch of stuff like the spark plugs and air filter and cabin air filter and a bunch of fluids and things of that nature, but it also includes the timing belt. And I've talked to my customer and I've talked them into using a whole timing component kit, which is going to be your timing belt and water pump and idler bearing, tensioner, new serpentine belt. And I always think that's the best way to go on these, particularly if you're going to tear them apart and you plan on keeping the vehicle for the next 100,000 miles. It's always a good little bit of insurance, that way you don't have to tear it apart again for a leaky water pump. So I've got the kit here, which includes the water pump and gasket. What else comes in here? Like I say, we've got our tensioner with a grenade pin installed, and the other portion of our tensioner assembly with the idler bearing on it. What other kinds of goodies? We've got the idler bearing that goes into the Hondas. We've got our Mitsubishi timing belt for the old Honda. And we've got a sweet sticker. Stickers are always great. And we got a whole set of instructions. So I say we get started. So this should cover a whole host of vehicles. It should be very similar to the Odysseys and Ridgelines and Pilots, all back through the years. I don't know specifically what the coverage is as far as the 3.5, but I know I've done a lot of them, and I've done them way back into the late 90s to these to very current 10s and 9s and 8s and right up through, and they're very, very similar. So this process should be very much the same as it is on a lot of your Hondas. Well, that escalated quickly. Brought this thing in first thing this morning I wanted to shoot a video on the timing belt portion of it. It's almost lunchtime. You walk away for like a second, and then all of a sudden 4 hours pass, and 3 hours, whatever, but we gotta get busy. First thing first, we gotta get this serpentine belt off here, so we're gonna grab this tensioner. Take the tension off of that. I'm using a serpentine belt tool. I don't know what they usually take. I think it's like probably a 14 millimeter. Taking that. That's great. We're already bleeding. One of those days. I'm going to take the belt off. If you're going to reuse the belt, mark the direction that it was on here. I find if you put them on and then reverse the rotation of them, often you'll end up with a chirp or a squeak of some sort. Got to remove the little plastic fender liner here. So get these clips out. Take a lot of these out in our videos. Like I said, I've got the tools to remove them, but my favorite tool still to this day is a screwdriver and a pair of side cutters. It allows you to drop them on the floor here, get underneath the clip, just kind of pry the center of them up, and then pull them right out of there. Like I say, the tools I have to remove them just they don't seem to work that great. At least not as good as this method here. If I get a stubborn one like that, I grab it with a pair of side cutters and pull it right out. So we'll take out whatever one's necessary. We have to get this piece off. Looks like quite a few. This one looked like it was missing a clip because I only ended up taking out 3. Just one there, and there's one up under here. Looks like it was missing the one that goes in there, but like I say, instead of taking, it's up to you. You can pull this whole you know, the whole fender liner here and the whole piece that goes underneath. Or you can just kind of push it down. The plastic's pretty flexible, it won't crack it or break it or anything. And then we'll work on it from here. So what we've got to deal with now, because we've already got the belt off, we've got to take the pulley off. This is the famous Honda crankshaft pulley bolt. These things can be an absolute disaster. You need about a 1-inch impact and 7,000 pounds of force to get them off. They make a couple different things. They've got your typical Honda Acura crankshaft holding tool, which you can see I have, and it works. It's kind of a pain. The nice thing is if these cars come in, they're standard transmission, you just put it in gear and hold your foot on the brake and you can take that thing off with about an 8-foot breaker bar. You can use a standard 1/2-inch impact with a standard 19mm socket. Or you could have a friend that's a tool junkie like I do, and he sends you this thing in the mail. This is the newest, latest, greatest Honda socket. And here's your standard 19mm, and then here's this jumbo super socket. And from an engineering standpoint, this thing should work fabulously. Because the problem is we have so much energy that's lost in a standard impact socket trying to take these off. They make up for it with mass. There will be no flexing in this socket. That thing is ridiculous. So that's what that looks like. He sent it to me and told me the next time you do a Honda to use it. If it works, I have to buy it. So it's kind of a catch-22 here. So let's see if it works. Like a dream. Now, I guess for the sake of experiment, I should have stuck a regular 19mm on there and tried it. But anybody that's watching this that has done a Honda crankshaft pulley bolt knows how tight these things can be. And it's bizarre because you'll take these off and like I say, you got 8 feet of bar on there and all of a sudden snap, it pops loose, and you just spin it out with your fingers. So it always makes me wonder what holds these in. But it looks like I just spent, I don't know, he used to have a note taped to it. I don't know how much I owe him, but I owe him some money now. Watch your keyway. Sometimes these keyways will actually wiggle right out depending on how much tension is on the lower crank cog or crank gear, I guess you call it, timing belt gear. I've had these come right out and all of a sudden you don't have it anymore. You gotta look around, so be mindful of that. Now, this job's going to prove to be a little more difficult to record than I anticipated. Kind of got the control arm in the way. I'm going to take our belt tensioner off. I believe it's just this bolt here at the bottom, which is like a 12mm. Then I think it's the one here in the center, which is like a 14. So just in case you can't see me while I'm taking this apart, that's what I'm going to do is just take that off, take that bolt off, because the upper portion of the tensioner is in the way of our cover. So that's the reason we have to pull that tensioner. Hey, going with a theme, we're dropping everything today. So you get that eye, that's what your tensioner should look like. Like I said, that was the bolt I was pointing to up in the top, and the other one that goes in there, no big deal. I think some of these tensioner designs are a little different on some of the 3.5s. I don't really keep track of the different, makes and models and stuff. They're very similar. If it's in the way, you gotta take it off. It's simple as that. So what I'm gonna do next, being that we're down here, I'm gonna start pulling this lower cover. So basically these 10mm bolts or 10mm headed bolts, I'm gonna go ahead and start taking those off. Yeah, so we got there. I mean, they just go around all the plastic bolts there, or all the bolts in the plastic cover, rather. We're gonna pull those off and get that loose, and we'll go back up top and do some more work. Told you I'm going with my theme. So all these bolts are kind of look the same. They're a shouldered bolt because they go through the plastic. You'll notice as you start taking them out. Alright, I gotta move my camera so I don't keep dropping bolts here, but that's what I'm gonna continue doing, getting this lower cover loose. Alright, so when you're all done down here, I reached as many as I can from at the bottom. I've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, well, that's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. I got 11 bolts total from the bottom. Some of the bolts are the ones that go in the upper timing covers, but I just get everything I can while I'm down here, and now we'll set it down and go up top and get the rest of those out. Continue on. Let's get our plastic covers off here. Just this one over here and one in the back. Pretty self-explanatory. Looks like we've got a wire clip in this front one we have to remove. See that little green clip? A lot of times I'll just pinch them from the back side. With a pair of pliers, you'll see there's a little set of, like wings, I guess. I don't really know. You just pinch them with a pair of pliers and then you can push them straight through. So you'll see, I'll flip it around there so you can see what I'm talking about. I just essentially grab these little ears on here. I think I've showed them in other videos if you guys follow along. That just pinch them with a pair of pliers and then you can just push them right through. You'll see what's holding you, you know, as you try to take them off. If you try to pry them off, you end up just breaking them. Let's get that out of your way. I should be able to remove our upper timing cover here for the front, and then the one that's in the back looks the same. It's hard to record, but in the back there's going to be a wiring harness that runs over top of it that's kind of pressed in this little channel. You just pull that wiring harness out and take the bolts off, and that'll come off in the same fashion. Wiring harness out of there. You guys can see or not. Maybe. My fingers kind of hurt a little more today than usual. Making grabbing onto things a little more difficult. Alright, so get that harness up out of the way. Feels like I missed a bolt. Yeah, I did. A bolt down here I didn't see. If the power steering pump's in your way, you can just peel that off too. Makes the job a little easier sometimes. I'm trying to do it by feel here. Wow. There, we took something out anyways. Last one. That should allow our cover to come loose. You gotta take your uppers off before you can take the lower off. They sit down over top of the lower cover. And these little rubber holes are inspection holes. If you suspect your timing has jumped, you can line up your pulley. And I think if you're doing it by the book, step one is to essentially put number one at top dead center and all that. I don't do that until I get the covers off. That way I can see my marks easier, and then we just roll it around. But do it however you like. The kits usually come with instructions, so. Then we can pull our lower cover out. And with that off, we should be looking something like this. So we've got our crank pulley, we've got our crankshaft sensor down here that plugs in right there. We've got our idler, our tensioner pulley and tensioner assembly. There's our hydraulic assembly over there. Our water pump's kind of hiding behind here. We can't really see that. It's behind this engine mount. And we got our see, that'd be our left side cam and our right side cam, or however you want to interpret that. So that's pretty much it. I think next thing we've got to do is support our engine from underneath, and we've got to take our get our engine mount out of the way and take and yank the water pump off there, and we're pretty much in the home stretch there. Pull this cover off. Don't ever forget to put that back on. Always seems to me to be the best idea is to set this with the lower cover, not with the crank pulley, because otherwise you'll forget it. Before we get too hog wild there, I'm going to take and rotate our crank and line up our timing mark. So our first timing mark is right there, that little arrow right here at the top, and then there's another corresponding arrow on our crank pulley, which is directly in line with our keyway there. If you can see those or not. So we can zoom in on them a little bit for you. So you can see the green arrow. I don't know if they're always green. This one's green. And then our little arrow up here. So just going to rotate that around. So the easiest way I find to do this is just put your crankshaft bolt right back in. It goes in and bottoms out, and it has a huge washer on it, so it doesn't hurt anything. I just use a regular just ratchet and socket. Just go in a clockwise direction and just turn it slow. Should turn quite easy for you. You'll feel it as it comes up on, you know, compression strokes and such. But the catch is even though we're lined up down here, our cams could still be off because they spin at half the rate as the crankshaft. So now we got to go look. Worst case scenario, we got to go around again in another circle. So this is where you have to be careful. You come up and you look at this front cam, and you can see our timing notch that is right there on the cover. And then we look at that cam, and we can see we also have the notch right there on our pulley. And they're directly across from each other, and you would think that you have it. Unfortunately, you don't. The front cam sprocket actually has two notches on it. You'll see the number 5 that's printed right there on that cam sprocket. I believe it should be the number 1 that should be up there. So you have to kind of be mindful of that. And a real telltale giveaway is that you'll look at the rear cam sprocket. Get a light back here, and you'll see that we have a similar alignment mark. This is really difficult to film. There's another notch up in that cover that looks just like the notch here in the front cover. That looks just like, let's see if I can see that for you. It looks like the little number 1 back in here. That little notch back in there. There's the exact same mark in the rear, on the rear head cover. And I don't know if we can see that or not. I'll try to do my best for you. So yep, you can see that there. Kind of get this steady. You can see that notch. That's what we're looking to line up, is that little number 1 back there with a corresponding mark on the rear cam, which you can see, or hopefully you can see, it is not there. It actually is 180 degrees off, which is what we'd expect if we thought we were off. It's directly there at the bottom, and it's also painted green. You can see that little green number 1. Try to get my hand back here. So we've got this little green number 1 right down there at the tip of my finger. Get my hand back out so you guys can see it. Sorry about the shaky video. You can see that we're directly 180 degrees off from where we need to be, which is what I would expect. I should have just rotated it twice because it's kind of like you know, Murphy's Law. So I'll go back underneath here, just put the vehicle on the ground. We'll rotate this around. Pretty much just got to go another 360 on the crank, and that'll give us 180 on the cams. Should put us dead on. Well, that's got to have us pretty close right there. So we can see we got our crank mark pretty much dead on. A little trick I'll do on the belt marks is, because sometimes they're hard to see alignment wise, but you can take and draw, get a paint marker, it works here, you can draw right straight across where that cog would be, and then that gives you a little better reference as to where it is. Because I mean, you look at it here, it looks like in the video we're a half a tooth off, but when you look at it from a straight on, or sticking a mirror down here, we can see we're clearly dead on. I went ahead and just made myself a very similar mark there in the rear. See if you guys can see that or not. May not be focusing, but like I say, you can just kind of highlight the factory mark there that they had green just a little bit with paint marker, and run yourself a line right across the belt so you can make sure it lines up. Well, I hope the video hasn't been too wiggly so far. It's harder than I thought to record. So right now I'm going to take and, I don't know where we left off. I had to go eat some lunch, but I got the floor jack underneath the oil pan right now, because the next thing we have to do is pull this motor mount off, and I think that's where we left off. So you got to support your engine. If you got your car on jack stands, just slip a floor jack under the oil pan so it just touches the oil pan. Stick a block of wood there, a rubber chunk or something to keep it from crushing it. We're going to unhook the motor mount and get that out of our way. We're going to have to yank the power steering pump off, kind of like I mentioned earlier. There's one bolt that comes from the top on a little bracket we got to get to, and we'll just get that right out of the way. So you can see where I got my floor jack. Like I said, I just got it on the bottom of the pan, and that'll be fine. The power steering pump has just a couple 12mm bolts. Of course, we already did a video on changing one of these on the Ridgeline, on a personal truck. Remember, these things came off quite easy, so I'm just going to spin this off out of the way and give us some room. Should have done it earlier to make getting the covers a bit easier. Pick that up out of our way. We can see our bolt down there that we need to get to. And so what we can do now to kind of make this easier is we can just take and unhook this suction line here off the pump. And that way there we can just kind of stick this up out of the way. Now this will make a little bit of a mess when I get a little diaper to stuff under here. You got one there?
It's got a little bit in it.
Oh, that's okay. Alright, so we'll just stuff this under here. I think you can probably pick these up at any parts store. Pig Mats, I think, is the name. Well, of course, a lot of generic brands out there now, but kind of pull that off. Didn't even spill a drop. If you didn't have a mat ready, you probably would have spilled all of it. So kind of tuck that hose out of the way. We'll pick our power steering pump up, set that out of the way, and now we've got plenty of room. So before you yank these bolts out, like I say, make sure you've got the engine supported with a floor jack or something. There, and you can see how the engine kind of sprung up on me a little bit. I'm going to let that down a smidge. All right, there we go. And you'll see that you can take the floor jack right out. It'll stay by itself. There's enough other engine mounts on here. It's a little springy, but it's totally fine. I still like to use the floor jack, even though I know that, just so there's no surprise. I probably should have done this first before I crack this loose, but probably want to stick one bolt back in there. We can. Bring it down just a little bit. Got to crack the through bolt there. We got to crack that loose, and it's kind of springy if you try to do it afterwards, but alright, so we got that crack loose. Now we can take our bolt back out. We just need to get the other half of this mount out of our way. And like I say, being that it's mounted on rubber, get kind of crack it loose first. And I think we have to take our power steering reservoir out of the way too. To get the bolt out. Yeah, let me grab an air ratchet. So we'll get our reservoir out of the way. They just pull up off their bracket. Just got to kind of wiggle them a little and they'll slide up off. Gotta get that out of our way. Push it off to the side. There's going to be a couple little rubber, I don't know what to call them, like little rubber ears or insulators or washers or something there. You got to watch them because they'll fall off that mount sometimes. These little guys right here, you just kind of got to watch these things. Actually, I'll just pull them right off right now so I don't lose them. And that's what our mount looks like. So what we have to do now to get the engine mount off, there's 3 bolts that hold it on, and unfortunately one of them you can't really get out unless you get the rest of this engine mount off here. So you'll see right smack on top of it, now this is pretty hard to get in here and record, there's going to be a bolt that takes a 14mm wrench. You can just reach in there and take it off, and all that does is just a bracket that holds the wires. There's the wiring harness on there, and there's one clip for your high pressure line of your AC. So we're going to get that bracket off and just kind of unclip it from the AC if we can. Into your set done. And then we're going to unclip the wire harness off it, and this is what your bracket will look like. Once that's off, I'm going to reach down and get the bolts off this motor mount. Now I'll move the camera so you can see, but we got 2 bolts that go straight down on the frame, and then there's another one that goes back behind the PCM. Now you can elect to take all this crap off to get to it, or you can just use I use this extension. It's got a little bit of a wobble on it that allows me to reach way down in there, and you get right on it, just like that, and then you come up here and take it off as opposed to tearing all this off. So it's totally up to you, whichever way you want to go about it, but I'll move the camera so you can see. So like I say, first thing first, I can't really record where this 3rd one is. Get a ratchet to work here, but you'll see when you're doing it, you'll completely understand. It's easier to take the bolt out than it is put it back in. Sometimes it's a little tricky getting it in, but it's easier than tearing everything apart. Yeah, like I say, that's our theme for the day, dropping stuff. So then we'll get these lower bolts out and then get this mount right out of our way. Wow. It's got a little bit of rust on them. Get the socket to cooperate here. There we go. I'd say these wobble extensions are pretty helpful with a job like this. So once you get those out, this mount should be loose now. Let's see if we can take that right up out of the way. And this here is that bracket. You know, I couldn't record it very well, but this is the bracket that sits on top of the mount. Your AC line goes there, and you've got those 2 wire clips, you know, that you just have to pull a little retainer on and pull those off. Well, this is what it looks like, you know, when it's up in the open. And yes, I did go through and find all the bolts I dropped. Can't believe how much stuff I'm dropping today. Now, that's the bolt we're after. That's why we had to take the power steering pump off, is to get that 1 bolt off right there. Now, in the front of this motor mount, there's 3 bolts. Should take a 14. I think this is the only one that's really exposed. So we got to take these off. There's another one that's hidden right inside there. It's kind of in that recessed hole up inside that mount, and then there's another one straight down below these two. Like I say, you can reach down and grab that last one. These bolts are pretty long. So I'm going to finish peeling these three out, and then when I lift that mount out, I'll show you what it looks like. I'm getting this last bolt out, and I can't remember it offhand. Gonna jack the engine back up or not? I don't think so. Yeah, on these you don't. Yep. That's Toyotas or something I was thinking of. So we got that mount out. So that's what the mount looks like. Like I say, it's just got the 3 bolts. And there's that one that's kind of hidden that you really couldn't. It's kind of hard to see. You know, you can see those two, but so that's what that looks like. All right, so what I'm gonna do now, we're doing the water pump, and we're gonna do the belt and everything. So we just go full caveman on these. Just reaching here with a pair of cutters. We're gonna cut our timing belt just because that makes things easier. There, our timing belt's cut, but we know our timing marks are already all lined up, and if they move a little bit, it's no big deal. So I'm just gonna take and get the belt out of here, and then we're gonna work on the, get all our pulleys and all that stuff off. We'll be in the home stretch. So what I want to do now, just get your belt, get your belt fed out of there. We're going to take our tensioner off here. Of course, we got a new one of these, so we're going to spin this off, and we'll grab a 10 mil and we'll spin our hydraulic portion of it off. This has kind of a special bolt in it, so make sure you don't lose that. It's pretty unique. And that's kind of what that assembly looks like. See if I can reach down here. Oh, let's grab a short socket. I don't want to use this thing, I guess. What I'm peeling off is our hydraulic tensioner there. So we'll take the 2 bolts out of that. Of course, we got a new one with our kit, so we're not too worried about this one. We would use a little different process. Let's say we were going in here to not change the belt, which would be kind of odd. But there's our tensioner assembly. You can see it's good. We got a new one. It's a little damp around it. You know, I don't know if it's coming from the hydraulic portion or not, but we've got a new one either case. I'm gonna grab our 14 again. We're gonna take and pull this last idler off, which is like crazy tight. Alright, I'm getting a big ratchet. A little more than I want to pull on that little wrench, so we'll reach down here with a 14 socket, and oh, that was barely tight. We'll get this spun off. We don't have quite enough mustard to this baby. Good old Loctite. Being that it's difficult to record, what we're going to be doing next is we're going to go down there with a 10mm air ratchet, and we're going to buzz the remaining bolts in the water pump off and get that out of the way. And like I said, it's tricky to record, so you really can't see, but just kind of give you a reference as to where we're at. And I guess I should mention one thing. I did not drain the radiator. You can choose to get a bucket and pull the petcock out of the radiator, or you know, I've got a huge catch tray and real low profile bucket under the car right now. When I crack this loose, you know, the antifreeze naturally will seek its own level and be drained. So either way, I guess works. See if I can do this without dropping all of these. every time. Whoa! You know, when I started recording this video, I thought it was going to be all sweet and easy to record, but I don't think you guys can really see a whole lot. But I'm committed. So now we've got to get the water pump has one dowel pin on it, like a roll pin locator. I'm going to get a little bar and we're going to pry on that a little bit. It should pop it right loose. Make sure you got your bucket ready. There, now she's draining the quick way. You can see, I didn't show it on the other pump, but you can see those roll pins or hollow dowel pins. That's our locator. So once the pump's off, we're just going to come through with a towel or something. You want to make sure that sealing surface is clean. Now, even in the environment we live in, I've never taken one of these apart and never seen them like real crusty or nasty. So there's never a need to come in here with a cookie wheel ever. They're pretty precise fit, so typically you just have to just go through and wipe them off. Now, I will give you this tip if you've used the caveman method that I did, where you just pull the pump off and let it hit the floor, or the bucket rather, and it's sitting there dribbling and won't stop dribbling out of these ports. Just take your bucket out and jack the engine back up a little bit with your floor jack, and it will cease all your dripping. So you can kind of keep that in mind. Makes put it together a little bit easier. But even if it is dribbling a little coolant, it's an O-ring fit, so that won't hurt anything. Once you have everything cleaned off, all satisfactory, we're going to take and slip our new pump in there. Sorry if all you see is my head, but we're going to get our dowel pins lined back up. Then we're going to stick our bolts back in it, and the torque spec on those is 8.8 foot-pounds. Or about 108 inch-pounds. So I'm going to get these started and we'll get this torque down. Just make sure you're using a good quality pump. If you're not going to, buy OEM Honda, the cost between a good quality aftermarket and the Honda one is really, they're pretty close. Alright, well, we've got that torque down, and now we can start putting things back together here. So once your new pump's on, I usually take, I got my bucket under there. Easiest way to get the old coolant off is just some hot water. Now the hot water will take it right off, plus if it's hot, it'll evaporate real quickly. And now that I've done that, I just take a blow nozzle, I blast it off, and everything's just like new. Now we just got to start working backwards. I got our new tensioner here. Don't pull the pin yet, you'll be in for a surprise. So make sure that's stuck in there, and at least sticking out the back edge there a smidge. Just going to take our 2 bolts and stick that back down where it was, snug that up, and now we're in the home stretch here. I just take and snug these up. And we'll grab our tensioner, the idler, the other half of it, and we'll get that stuck on there. So you got to take your old tensioner assembly, you want to pull that sleeve out. Now be mindful that comes in from the back side. So we're going to take your new one, slip that right in. We got our shouldered bolt, we'll stick that in. We'll bring it down here and drop it on. And that gets torqued down to 19 foot-pounds, I believe. Let's get that spun on. When that's all done, that should have some, some movement in it, just like it does right now. There we go. 21.3, just like the book. So now we want to take and put our idler on. Make sure you're putting this on in the right direction that you took it off. I think if you put it on wrong, it would just lock up anyways. So put a little bit of Loctite on your bolt there. We'll stick that back in. Get the thread started. This one here we're probably going to have to wrench it in because it's probably still a little old Loctite in the hole. It's turning in okay. Came out pretty darn tight, I'll tell you that. And this one we're going to end up torquing down to 33 foot-pounds. So what I'll do now, we're just going to double check our timing because we've got everything ready. I'm just going to take and mark, just like we had on the belt. Essentially, I'm just going to mark the cogs. Trying to be all steady about it, but I'm definitely not. That way there we can easily look back there with a mirror. We can look on this one here in the front. We can definitely make sure our marks are lined up. It just makes the job 100 times easier because, as it's difficult for you to see back here on this one, it's difficult for me too. And the easiest thing to do is use a mirror. And if you draw your line on there, it's, you're only looking at like a 1/4 inch gap, so it's easy to tell that your marks are still dead on. Alright, well we gotta back up a step here. Gotta pull this tensioner back off. Just because I got a little bit ahead of myself as far as when it comes to putting the timing belt on. Get all excited and I don't think. We gotta take and yank this off real quick. Now we're gonna take and get our belt on. The reason I had to take that off is so we want to keep the tension, our belt tension. We're going to go around the crankshaft and we're going to keep this side over here towards the front of the engine or left side of the engine, however you want to think about it. We got to keep this side of the belt very tight and we want all our slack to end up over there on the tensioner side. And typically if our cam sprockets were just like this one, they have no outer flange on them like they do on the rear sprocket, we could just leave all our pulleys in place, similar to like what we do on a Subaru, and we just run our belt around and 1-2 barbecue. But that's not the case on this one because this pulley back here has the flange on it. If you're actually looking at one of these, you'll see what I'm saying. So now that we've got that out of the way, like I said, just getting a little bit ahead of myself there when we were putting things together. Getting all excited, and I'm running out of time. So now we're going to take and we're going to feed this belt onto the crankshaft down there. You can just kind of slip it in on those cogs. Okay, we've got that around. Like I say, we're going to keep this side of the belt tight. We don't want any slack over here on this side. We're going to go down around the water pump. And then we're going to come up around our last cam over here on the right side of the engine or the rear of the engine. Just going to kind of feed that all the way up and around. Trying to stay out of the camera way and do my job, and makes it a little tough. Okay, there we go. So you kind of feed that around, and the neat part about Honda, besides the fact that they're totally awesome, is on the cams, you'll notice they've got like these little aluminum bosses that stick out there, and it actually holds your belt on. You can see I'm not touching the belt, and what's really cool is once you get it fed on there, it holds the belt, and the same thing down on the crank pulley. You kind of slip them in there, it holds the belt, and everything's wonderful. And so you should see this side of the belt should be tight like it is right now. This side of the belt has tension on it. This side of the belt is where over on the rear half, I don't know if you guys can see back in there, but everything is loose on that side. So now that we've got that done, we'll take our tensioner that we just removed and we'll put that back in place. Now we'll go back through and retorque our tensioner. There. Even though I'm quite confident that nothing moved, I like to go through and just look with a mirror, make sure my marks are 100%. Everything appears to be dead on. Crank, both the rear cam and the front cam look really good, so I'm not worried about that. We've got everything torqued. We've got the tension where it needs to be. Now you just take and pull your grenade pin, if you can get that wiggled out of there. There we go. Hee-haw. So we got that out. That's what those look like. That takes our automatic tensioner there and springs it up. And now what we're going to do is roll the engine over a couple times, verify that we've got our timing on, and put things back together. Like I said, I'm just going to go around with this several times. Make sure you're going in the right direction. Always want to go clockwise, keeping all the slack over there towards the tensioner. Like I said, I'm just going to rotate this around a few times, line up our marks, make sure everything's good, finish this job up. Okay, we went around a couple times, going to just double check our marks. Like I said, the best way to do this is with a mirror. Get your head down in there, and it's pretty obvious to me that everything is dead on the money. And if you want, you can actually take this time once they're lined up and draw your mark across your belt. Now I'll just tell you, if you draw your line on your belt and you rotate the engine over, that line will never line back up in that spot until you went a certain amount of times, which is a lot of times around in a circle to get them to come back. So if you do mark your belt and you spin it around, don't be surprised if all of a sudden your mark's down here. That's just the way it works. So here's the front cam. There's our mark. There's our mark up there. Hopefully you can see it. I just got the camera shoved down in here for you. I'm not sure what you can see there. I kind of put the camera back in there, but there's our mark on that rear cam, and if you follow that right across to the head cover, you'll see the other corresponding mark. So before we get too far, I know we don't have the rest of the bolts in the water pump, but it should be on there enough to be able to fill it up with coolant. So it's always kind of been my thought is to put coolant in it right now where you can see everything. You can see the water pump. And if you screwed up, it'd be nice to find out right now as opposed to when the timing covers are on it. Like I say, there is 3 more bolts that go in the water pump, but it's an O-ring seal, and frankly, it's not going to leak, minus those 3 molds. So we've got that full now. It takes, well, this one took almost a full gallon. I just buy this stuff right from Honda, the Type 2. It's pre-mixed, ready to go. It's blue. And the good news is everything stayed high and dry. And I guess I didn't mention it, but when you're doing the timing belt and you're doing stuff over here, after you initially get it off, before you put the belt on, make absolutely sure everything is clean. Using the hot water evaporates all the old antifreeze and stuff that's spilled. And take a blow nozzle and blow things off, and degrease stuff if you have to. Usually these aren't greasy. These don't have a tendency to have leaky cam seals and crank seals and all that stuff. If that was the case, then you would want to, address that, obviously while it's this far. In this situation, we didn't, nothing's leaking, things high and dry, but definitely make sure your hands are clean. Make sure the pulleys are all grease free, particularly on the bottoms of the pulleys that you can't see, and, just do a good job. All right, so what I'm going to do now, I got to grab a little Loctite. Let me get Loctite. Oh my gosh. Got to Loctite the one, this lower bolt here. That's the only one that had Loctite on it from the factory, so you know me, we're old by the book Eric, they call me. Whoa, blasted myself with Loctite. Holy cow. Good thing I don't have the camera over here. I'm making a mess. What's new? Here we go. So now we got our Loctite on there. We're going to slip our motor mount back in here. Take that screw back out. I'm completely disorganized on this video. Probably because I'm slightly disappointed that I can't record how I want to record. And I know I've said that before, and then you guys tell me to quit whining, quit worrying about it. But I like to try to produce a good video. But frankly, this one's snug. Just hard to get in here and show things. So at any rate, we're going to tighten this down. I think it was 33 foot-pounds, if I remember right. We'll snug that little screw up. Get the rest of our mount on. Be in the home stretch. That wasn't even close with that little guy. So these go through the water pump too, so it is kind of critical that we torque these down and don't get all caveman on them. .33, 35 is pretty close. The other one I'm gonna have to get from underneath. I'll take and tighten that up before we forget. Get the rest of our mount put on. So what we gotta do now is we're just gonna put our put our mount back in. I really don't need to record too much of that, but we're just going to take and slide it back in there. I'm going to get my 3 bolts that held that in. I'm going to put those in. We're going to put our bracket back on the top, rehook our AC line to it, and then rehook our wire clips. So that's what I'm going to do. Just going to take and stick our little rubber things back on. In case you mixed them up, you can see how we got 2 different thicknesses. The thicker one goes towards the rear, and it really only kind of fits on there one way. There's a little ear. Well, you can see how it's got these notches in there. There's little corresponding ears on the actual mount itself that they kind of slip over, and all that does is I think it just provides this a little buffer in this engine mount. And you can actually see how this one over here is cut out a little thicker than that side there. So we'll slip that over. Once we've got the little rubbers back in place, we'll stick our through bolt through it. We'll stick our other 2 bolts back in this. We'll get those tightened up. And then we've got our little metal bracket that we'll stick on top that our little wire clips go on. That sucker to line up there, or what? There we go. Like I say, the easiest way to torque this cross bolt down is to, torque those down first. So here's what we're looking like underneath. So this job's been kind of a lot more difficult than I thought it was going to be to record, so just kind of trying to show you along where we're at here. So our next step is just kind of put our timing covers back on and finish this thing up. Take our bolt back out of there. Now don't forget to put this piece on. Someday if you do enough of these, you're going to forget it. It's inevitable. It's like gravity, it's the law. I don't know how many I've forgotten, but you do it once and you say, I'll never do that again. Then basically you do it again. So we'll get this kind of lined up on there. We'll get some bolts inserted back in it. And And then we'll head back up on top, put our covers back on up there. Once you get your cover on, you can put your crank pulley back on. Like I said, make sure you didn't lose your keyway during this process, because then it upset you. But you shouldn't have. I mean, if you'll know. But yeah, we got to put this in, tighten this down. The spec on it is 47 foot-pounds, and then an additional 60 degrees. So they might better just make a footnote that says tighten the crap out of it. So this is where the crankshaft holding tool comes in handy. Try to get it in here wedged up against the body, hopefully. We're going to do our, if this thing will hold. So there's our 47 foot-pounds, 46.6. I'm going to recalibrate my torque wrench here for doing degrees. Gotta let it sit steady, and then we're gonna do an additional 60 degrees, hopefully, without this thing flying apart. These are always a pain to do, especially if you're trying to do them by yourself. There's 25 degrees. There's 49. There's 60. Like I say, they might better just tell you to tighten them as tight as you can get it, because it's snug, let me tell you. And then these crankshaft pulley holders, if I can get this wedged up in there in a minute. No, I have to hook back on the crank bolt. Whoa! They don't, they just don't fit that good. At least all the ones I've ever seen, because the hex portion they go into, not only is it tapered, it's it's kind of a sloppy fit. So these things are always kind of wiggling around. If you got two guys holding bars, it's a pretty good chance one guy's going to get hurt. So you got that stuff on. Before we put the belt tensioner and a couple other little items we have on, it's a good idea. We're at a point where we can actually start the car. We've got the serpentine melt off. I mean, that's no big deal. We got the tensioner off, and the timing covers. But at this point, we can actually start it. Make sure the engine's smooth. We can make sure it's quiet. The only thing we're going to hear is just the timing belt going around. So if there's, some kind of interference, I don't know what there would be, but if there was any issues, we would know right away when we started it. And the good news is we won't have the whole thing back together. I mean, you just got to start it and let it run for not even a minute. Just if it starts, it starts. If it doesn't, well, something went wrong. Okay, you can shut it off. Well, I think this job's a success. So being that we're up here, we got our lower timing belt on. We're just going to take and throw our upper timing covers back on here. Just kind of reverse our process. At this point, you should be pretty familiar with what you took off. And essentially everything you take off, you got to put back on, right? And on your front one, don't forget to put your green clip back in there if you're working on this same make and model. I'm going to stick the rear one on, and the rear one has the wiring harness holder there, so don't forget that. That can kind of help you hold it up there while you get your bolts. You just kind of stuff your wiring harness back in there. And that holds that. And then we'll stick our bolts back in it, tighten that up too. Being that we're right here, let's see if we can put this on without making a mess. Took it off without making a mess. Haven't made too many messes today. Dropped a lot of bolts, not a lot of messes. Hit the bucket with all the antifreeze. That's very unusual. Usually the bucket will catch about 15%, the rest of which hits the floor. I did good. Alright, well, I'm going to tighten this up. We're going to throw put our reservoir back there where it belongs, get the hose back on this thing. And what we got left is the tensioner and the belt. That's it. So I'll get this out of the way. Like I say, see if we can do this again without spilling it. We did pretty good before. Alright, look at that. Like a champ. Our clamp lined up exactly where it was. Our reservoir put back on the bracket. Our overflow back on there. We'll go underneath, put the tensioner back on. Alright, so I'm just going to set the tensioner back in. Just like we took it off, you just have your one single bolt here in the center and just this one here. So pretty easy, but pretty difficult to record. But if you took it out, I assume you know where it goes back. Next thing we gotta do is throw the belt on. I just thought I'd show you a quick diagram of the belt routing procedure because it's easier to see here than it is up inside that car. Once you get your belt up and around there, putting the last part of it on can be kind of tricky. I always end with the power steering. This is really difficult to do if you're just using a wrench. Kind of double up your wrenches, but just they've got a lot of throw, so that's makes it a little tricky even with a serpentine belt tool. Alright, go ahead and start it. Take a look, make sure everything looks good. Looks like it's on the pulleys nice and even. Everything sounds good and quiet. I'm not going to let it run very long because I still got to do the spark plugs in it, so I don't want it to warm up at all. I don't want to take a chance stripping out the bolts or anything, but basically just going to fill up the reservoir, make sure we're full on coolant. I'm going to go through and finish the rest of the 100K service, and then we'll warm it up, but I think everything's going to be good here timing belt wise. Well, there you have it, viewers. That's the timing belt on the Honda 35. I know the camera angles and stuff weren't what they usually are, and it's abnormally tight to record. However, you know, working on these, there is a lot of room, so it's kind of like there's a lot of room, but there's not a lot of room for both of us. You know, the camera and myself in there. So I'm not sure what it's going to look like until I, you know, put it all together. But hopefully it turned out good and gives some guidance, and hopefully where we lacked, you know, the visual reference, hopefully the words flowing from my mouth, hopefully that helped fill in the blanks. The audio commentary, how's that? Or whatever other word you could insert there. So hopefully that helped to provide a little bit of illusion for you as to how things go together and you know, how it should fit and work and function. And I know a few of my methods are probably a little unorthodox as far as, you know, chopping the timing belt and, you know, pulling the pump off and letting the water go, but I've done so many of these and so many different timing belts, and, you know, I just figure, well, if the belt's junk, then fine. And I don't know what job you would typically do in there where you would actually reuse a timing belt anyways. So I see no need to actually follow the book and, you know, take the, you know, the battery bolt off and thread it in and hold the tensioner and, you know, take the belt off, you know, that way when, you know, frankly, this this way it works. You know, I mean, if you had a water pump that puked, you're going to put a belt on it. If you had cam seals that puked, you're going to put a belt on it. You know, if you had an idler bearing or something that went bad, you're going to put a belt on it. I mean, like I said, I just can't really think of a job. I mean, unless this came in, you know, tomorrow with a blown head gasket or something, I just think for the price of the belt, if you're going to tear it down this far, you're always going to put a new belt on it just because you're there. But that's strictly my opinion, so you can do it however you like. If you buy these timing component kits or you buy most timing belts, they do come with a pretty good set of instructions. This one did. It came with a whole pamphlet, you know, covering all the different Honda models with these 35s and their particulars, you know, the little minute variances in between each one and all the torque specs and everything listed on there. But common sense goes a really long ways when you're working on stuff. If you don't have a torque wrench, just use your mind, not your muscle. That's what I always say, and that'll get you a long ways. But I hope you guys like this video. Check us out on Facebook if you haven't already. You can find us on Google Plus too if you want to connect with us socially there. And just remember, viewers, if I can do it, you can do it. Thanks for watching.